Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Friday Ramblings, and we are continuing our Halloween countdown. So we, to catch up so far, have done classic movies, classic literature. We have done classic everything except classic television. But how classic? Well, we're not going to go as far back as Hammer Horror and its 50s and 60s roots. We're going to go to something from my childhood. So, just a little nostalgic. Little nostalgia. And that is one of the earliest HBO originals. Way before all your hour-long dramas, folks, there was a 30-minute spooktacular show known as Tales from the Crypt. Now, the important thing to note is that Tales from the Crypt was based off a series of old comic books, the main one of which was in fact called Tales from the Crypt, produced by EC Comics. EC was kind of the front runner in non-superhero comics, especially during that lovely period between the Golden Age and the Silver Age, when superhero comics had faded out of popularity following World War II. It's a thing. It happened. It's part of comics history. It's okay. We'll talk about that another time, another month. The important thing is that EC loved its horror stuff. Besides Tales from the Crypt, they had other intense, mature-rated comic books, such as The Haunt of Fear, The Vault of Horror, Crime Suspense Stories, Shock Suspense Stories, and Two-Fisted Tales. And all of these anthology-style books did help inspire the Tales from the Crypt TV show. And that's what we're going to discuss today, because that is what I'm personally familiar with, and it's freaking awesome. So a few things first. Tales from the Crypt was originally produced by and aired on HBO, as previously mentioned. Now, the key here is that HBO is a premium cable service, and as such, they were able to push the boundaries of what could be allowed on television when it came to violence and nudity, along with flat-out sexual content. Because, you know, nudity, sometimes it's artistic, sometimes it's all contextual. It's not always inherently sexual. So you can have nudity, you can have sexual content, there can be an overlap, but they're still two separate circles. You know, the whole little, what is it, little Venn diagram thing? Yeah, it's a lot harder to do with your hands than draw on a piece of paper. So, because of that, when Tales from the Crypt has aired on cable, it is aired in censored, re-edited format. But the good news is you can watch Tales from the Crypt as it was intended to be, because you can purchase it on DVD and Blu-ray. That's right, including you can go for full broke and get complete series box set style, or the individual seasons if you're not sure if this is quite your jam. For those of you who didn't get to watch in its prime. Tales from the Crypt has also had an awesome opening theme composed by our good friend Danny Elfman. If you don't know who Danny Elfman is, let me know in the comments. I will be happy to do an episode putting over Danny Elfman, because you should know who Danny Elfman is. Danny Elfman is freaking awesome, and he loves his creepy music. Seriously, don't make me get a chair and put it in the corner you will sit in that corner and you will think about what you are missing in your life if you don't know the awesomeness of Danny Elfman. I will do it. But I will do it after you finish watching this video. So, Tales from the Crypt was an anthology-style series, which meant that each episode told its own story. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, done in one. The other key part is that Tales from the Crypt had hosting segments by the Crypt Keeper, who was the character that introduced the stories in the original Tales from the Crypt comics, but is now brought to life via puppetry and the voice of... Hold on, I want to look at this in print, make sure I pronounce this right. John Edward Cassier. I had to double check that last name. John's easy to pronounce. I do try my best on the surnames. Now, the Crypt Keeper, as presented, was, besides very skeletal, undead-looking, tended to be a little maniacal and witty in his introductions, inserting a lot of black comedy or gallows humor, depending on which phrase you prefer, into his introductions of these stories. Now, as I said, many Tales from the Crypt stories were inspired by the classic EC comic anthology books. Some were originals written for the show. How long did the show last? Well, it lasted from 1989 to 1996. That is 7 seasons and comprises 93 episodes. I know they were so close to 100. I hate that. It's like, y'all could have done just a single more short season. Or just extended some of those seasons. Heck, each season, one more episode. And you could have, bam, hit 100. It's such a nice round number. It's psychologically pleasing. 100. 93 is just, it's just there. 93. But, what can you say? So, what else can we say about the TV show without getting into specific plot spoilers? Well, the episodes were 30 minutes long, and many of the stories were not just scary and creepy, but often had the kind of poetic justice twist ending that actually made you kind of feel good in the end. Yes, people died. Yes, people suffered fates worse than death. But the one who got it worst in the end almost always deserved it. Yep. Because the thing is, those decades-old stories that we referenced, from that lovely period before superhero comics took over the industry as the bulk of the marketplace and have really never let it up. Back then, all those scary stories and true crime stories, that was part of how they, for many years, snuck under the radar of the moral majority, constantly questioning what entertainment was being shown to the masses. Was, hey, look, we know it's gory. We know it's a little scandalous on the sexy front. But all those sinners, they get punished in the end. So it's actually good moral plays. And if you think that attitude ended with those decades of yesteryear, and that, once we got into the kick-ass 70s and 80s, that kind of stuff went away, it didn't. Go look at your iconic slasher films. There's a reason there's the cliche about the virgin always lives. That same attitude has stayed with horror for many, 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 many years, even to the relatively present day. Horror filmmakers love killing slutty teenagers. It's just a thing. You're having sex young, you're unmarried, you're going to have to die. But we're branching off a little bit. So, Tales from the Crypt featured classic comic book stories and originals with that same creepy poetic justice vibe. Now in televised format with a kick-ass puppet host. What else can we say about the show? Why should it grab your interest if you've never watched before? Why should you rewatch it? Okay, well, how about a list of people who use that show to add to their resume and have since gone on to have pretty impressive resumes? Really now. Really now. Let's go right down through this. A variety of famous faces that have starred in episodes of Tales from the Crypt include Anthony Michael Hall, Benicio del Toro, Brad Pitt, Brooke Shields, Cheech Marin, Christopher Reeve, Corey Feldman, Dan Aykroyd, Daniel Craig, Demi Moore, Ewan McGregor, Isaac Hayes, Iggy Pop, Jada Pinkett, Joe Pesci, John Lithgow, John Stamos, Judd Nelson, Kirk Douglas, Malcolm McDowell, Martin Sheen, Meatloaf, Michael J. Fox, Robert Patrick, Sandra Bullock, Slash of Guns N' Roses fame, Steve Buscemi, Tim Curry, Tom Hanks, Whoopi Goldberg, among others. Now, if that's not enough for you, how about the fact that episodes were directed by some directed and produced by well-known talent such as Richard Donner, Joel Silver, and Robert Zemeckis. That's right, folks. There were people that really made their name both in front of and behind the camera. Is that not enough for you? Do you really want to know more about some of that Hollywood cultural impact of Tales from the Crypt? Okay, how about this? Even after 93 episodes of awesomeness, we got 2 spin-off movies, Demon Knight and Bordello of Blood. They had intended to make a 3rd movie. However, there was some issues with scripts. There was originally going to be one called Dead Easy, which was a New Orleans zombie film. Nobody could quite agree on a perfect script. There was one that was going to be called Body Count, written by veterans from the X-Files. But again, studio heads couldn't quite agree on the script. Quentin Tarantino's vampire flick From Dusk Till Dawn, and Peter Jackson's ghost-based Michael J. Fox starring movie The Frighteners were considered as possible Tales from the Crypt films before it was decided to let them go on their own merit. But it gets deeper than that, folks. During the height of Tales from the Crypt's popularity, there was a Saturday morning cartoon show called Tales from the Crypt Keeper in 1993 that was spun off from the HBO series, in which you would see stories that had a lot of the violence, gore, and sexual content toned down so that they would be creepy for children, but not traumatizing. In 1999, the series was revived on CBS for an additional 13 episodes under the title New Tales from the Crypt Keeper. The original version of it had lasted for 2 seasons on ABC with a total of 26 episodes, which means when it was all said and done, they had 39 episodes under both formats. There was also a kids game show that aired on CBS for one season called Secrets of the Crypt Keeper's Haunted House. Now, in all of these, Crypt Keeper would continue to be voiced by John Kasser. Now, there was also an attempt to spin off a Two-Fisted Tales series on Fox. However, Fox did pass on the pilot, and 3 of the segments were added on to the Tales from the Crypt so that the script wouldn't be wasted. Finally, after the original Tales from the Crypt series ended, a spin-off called Perversions of Science premiered in June 1997 on HBO. These stories being based more on science fiction instead of horror. The series was unsuccessful, ending only a month after it had begun airing. Perversions of Science featured a stylized female robot host in place of the Crypt Keeper. So, what's the good news we can say? Well, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of a couple episodes. I know we have a general spoiler-free policy here. Don't want to say like rule or law. But we are going to push against that policy a little. We're going to discuss a few highlight episodes that did occur on Tales from the Crypt that are, for me personally, episodes that I've remembered even more than 20 years since the last time I saw them. Let me see here. What's some good ones? What's some good ones? We have from season 1, inspired by Haunt of Fear number 19, a story of a newlywed couple who, after a car accident, end up settling for the night inside the mansion of the bride's aunt. During the night, the groom plans to kill his new bride for her inheritance, but finds out that his in-laws have a dark past, and his bride may not be such a willing and easy victim. Previously mentioned Demi Moore shows up in Season 2 as a gold-digging secretary who marries a slob of a man after being told by a fortune teller that he will die shortly after inheriting a large sum of money. However, the problem with vague predictions is they are often misinterpreted and things do not end well for you. This was based off a story from Shock Suspense Stories. One of my favorite senior citizen actors, William Hickey, showed up as a rich elderly bachelor who wanted to impress a young woman and meets up with a doctor who helps him switch his body with a younger man. Unfortunately, he realizes that the young woman may not necessarily be impressed by physical beauty. This was from the actual Tales from the Crypt comic. Let's see what else we got. A writer finds himself with an unquenchable desire for his neighbor. Finally finds a way to gain her attention, only to regret his choice after the woman's own growing love for him becomes a little too obsessive. Down on his luck reporter investigates several bizarre homeless murders soon discovering they may be related to an alleged charitable organization that is not everything it seems to be. This episode stars Steven Weber, who would go on to fame on the TV series Wings, and Rita Wilson, who had quite a fun film career herself, including Sleepless in Seattle and Jingle All the Way. Well, that's a good one from another season here. Mimi Rogers is an aging model who resorts to murdering her younger rivals, including iconic pinup model herself, Kathy Ireland, in order to revive her own modeling career. However, she soon finds out that everything comes around, and this beauty pageant is a little too final of a big break for her. Joe Pesci plays a con man who tries to trick a pair of reclusive twin sisters into dating him so he can steal their inheritance. But when he finds out the twins are even bigger sinners than he is, he might end up losing in the end. Yeah, gotta love Joe Pesci there. What else do we got? What else do we got? That's another good one. Billy Zane plays an down on his luck magician who kills a rival magician played by the iconic Martin Sheen in order to steal his famed prop and accompanying trick, the Box of Death. Ooh, now here's a good one. I do remember this one specifically. A bookworm is tricked by a jock, played by Anthony Michael Hall, and their evil Egyptologist professor, played by Jeffrey Jones, who big horror fans know from a variety of films, most iconically Charles Dietz in Beetlejuice, as well as Principal Rooney in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, for those of you who like things a little more comedic and less frightening. And these two major Hollywood actors team up to turn that lovely young bookworm into a virgin sacrifice for a long-preserved mummy who may not be as dead as folks would prefer mummies to be. Ooh. Two martial artists are forced to fight to the death by their domineering wives. This also besides the 4 characters established there, we also get a guest appearance by iconic singer Wayne Newton. Now, this is one I do remember, too, because I love the plot twist, poetic justice at the end. A narcissistic young artist with a penchant for gore goes on a psychotic rampage when her husband, a soap company owner, fires her. Seriously, I love the twist at the end. That's all I'm going to tell you. It's just one of those things that will just stick in your head forever. And let's see, we're getting down to our final season here. Victorian era England, a corrupt priest discovers that he is the long-lost father of twin daughters, a beautiful, gentle girl named Angelica, and an angry, deformed girl named Leia. And in another episode, after creating a machine that collects thoughts from the dead, which had accidentally resulted in his own lover's death, a young man becomes obsessed with resurrecting her at any cost. And finally, we're going to give a quick summary of the series finale, because it was the only animated episode in the original Tales from the Crypt's run, which was a version of the Three Little Pigs, featuring Bobcat Goldthwait as the Big Bad Wolf, Brad Garrett as one of the Three Little Pigs, and goes not just through the initial Three Little Pigs story, but includes a trial that is not about finding true justice, and thus revenge on the Big Bad Wolf. The animation for this episode was provided by Nelvana, who also did the animation for the previously mentioned animated spin-off Tales from the Crypt Keeper. Now, as I said, there are 93 episodes to the series, and that was only a handful. I basically picked one or two from each of the seasons to kind of give you a full highlight of how there is really solid material from every episode. Like, this was not one of these shows that ran a season or two longer than it should have been and was, past running on fumes. It was a great show until the end, and it is highly remembered. The character of the Crypt Keeper, for people my age and a little bit older, because honestly, I was probably a little too young to watch the show when I did, but, it's a thing. But the Crypt Keeper is a part of our pop culture memories. The legacy lives on and has even featured some fun spoofs on Adult Swim show Robot Chicken, featuring one of my favorite skits wherein the Crypt Keeper calls foul on much more recent thing Monster High for stealing his gimmick of making horror puns non-stop. Which, again, you need to look this episode up online if you've never seen it. I'm not going to spoil the full ending for you, but let's just say it takes some good-natured shots at Monster High, as well as showing that the Crypt Keeper, hey, he's always got one more pun up his robed sleeves, which my sleeves aren't wide enough to have too many puns. I don't know though, let me shake one out, might be a bat in there. As I said before, Tales from the Crypt is available on DVD in individual seasons or a complete series box set. For people who are highly involved with the horror genre, this is not stuff that will scare you by and large. It is, when it comes to horror television and movies, as far as the gore and creep level go, kind of standard fare. But the fact that so many of these stories were based off pre-existing comic books that were published decades before, and at the time, and in my opinion, still hold up as quality stories to see in any format, you gotta love it. As I said, there's a very distinct feel to Tales from the Crypt. I have found that the relatively recent movie Trick or Treat, or Trick or Treat, the way it's stylized, which is an anthology horror film tends to have a lot of that same Tales from the Crypt vibe to it, wherein the people that get punished by these supernatural threats tend to be people who really we didn't need around as examples of the human race. So, should you check it out if you're a horror aficionado? Yeah, because as I said, you're going to find a lot of recent horror stuff that has taken influence from Tales from the Crypt's general vibe and style. You might even enjoy the episodes in and of themselves if you've never given it a try. If you did watch it back in its original airing in the early 90s there, should you give it a rewatch? Yeah! Dig into that nostalgia. This is the time of year to refamiliarize yourself with the Crypt Keeper. Should you give the movies a watch? Yeah, I own both movies on DVD. Got them in one of those 2-movie sets. Demon Knight's a solid little story on its own right. Bordello of Blood leans more into the humor level of it. It stars Dennis Miller, who is a brilliant comic, but again, he is a comic first and foremost. But it features some good old-fashioned lusty-busty female vampires, as the term Bordello of Blood would imply, and that's always a good time on its own for different reasons. But are either one of them quite as good as the show? Some of the weaker episodes, yeah. Neither one of them is really a stain on the Tales from the Crypt legacy. Some of those spin-offs, the Tales from the Crypt Keeper cartoon show wasn't bad. Again, if you realize that they are going more for PG level scary, then yeah, it was well animated, especially for its time. The fact that the Crypt Keeper is back in even a more child-friendly format, but with the same voice to him, certainly will help you feel like, hey, this is something to give me a nice warm-up to the main show episodes, something you can watch with your kids before you send them to bed. Because, hey, it's October. Nothing wrong with making the kids have to stay awake for a few minutes in a dark room, hoping that monster under their bed is really just their cat snoring. And yeah, trust me, cats can snore, especially when they get older and they start, maybe getting some sinus issues. I've had a lot of cats growing up. A lot of them lived to old age. It can happen. Happens to us humans, too. What about that game show? Honestly, the game show's probably a miss. So, where does that leave us? Well, we're only one stop away from concluding our Halloween Ramblings countdown. And now we've done literature, we've done movies, we've done video game, we've done TV show. There's only one format left. There's only one format left for next week. And I foreshadowed it with this video. That's right, folks. We are going into comic book monsters. Specifically, though, ones from Marvel Comics. Heroes and villains with a supernatural slant. So join us next week for our big finale, when we discuss some of Marvel Comics' most iconic monstrous characters on the eve of Halloween. Well, what does that leave for Halloween? Well, I'm going to go ahead and give you a spoiler so you can start planning out in advance. That's right, folks. In 8 days, on October 31st, we did 5 ramblings, but there were only 4 Tuesdays to do game streams. So we're going to post a bonus Saturday Halloween game stream. And it's going to be full of monsters. Ugly monsters. What are we going to game? You're going to have to tune to find out. But yes, folks, come Halloween, there will be some gaming. There will be demons. And they will be slain. Because when it's all said and done, all this spookiness is good for an adrenaline thrill. But let's never forget, we always try to keep a positive vibe here at Roulette Productions. At least on my shows. You know, Generation eXpletive that I co-host, we get a little more critical on there sometimes. But it's all about positivity, and it's all about the spirit of Halloween, which is not embracing the darkness, but overcoming it. After all, it's one thing to dress up as a ghost and be a jerk. It's another thing to dress up as a ghost and get some candy out of it and remind yourself that you can be spooked in the moment, but when it's all said and done, your mind is what matters. And that means, no matter how many tales the Crypt Keeper tells you, nothing in his big book of tales has power over you unless you give it to them. I'll see you in 7 for our big finale rambling. And I hope you are still alive when you join us. Because I do not want to dig you up from your own crypt. See you then.